So I will lead us. So I'll call to order Willington School Building Committee meeting. Today is July 7th, 2021 at 6:32 p.m. All right, after call to order, chairperson's report. Again, some of these things Catherine has asked me to share. She did reach out to the Hall Foundation, invited them to attend this meeting. So it is possible at some point we might see someone hop on here. Otherwise, nothing else to report on that end. So we'll move on to approval of meeting minutes. We have two sets. You should have received the minutes from our June 16th meeting and then a special meeting. So I would entertain a motion to accept the regular meeting minutes from June 16th.
I move that we, go ahead.
I think you're the only one talking.
Oh, is there an echo? I move that we approve the minutes from the regular meeting on June 16th, 2021.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Brianna, great job capturing a really detailed but important meeting. So thank you.
Second that.
All right, seeing no further discussion, I will call for a vote. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Are you voting?
Aye.
Unanimous. And the main reason I ask, and we get down to the public meeting section later, we'll talk about it. Unless if it's not a unanimous vote, then we have to have a roll call vote in this method. So, all right. That leaves us with our June 21st minutes. I would entertain a motion to approve those. That was the committee meeting.
So moved.
And acquisition moved by Gary. Is there a second? Seconded by Nick. Sorry, Justin. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Unanimous. Okay. Communications. I will share with you that the town email, we've set that up so that Catherine actually can receive those emails. So that as the chair, she has access and sees them all to report anything necessary. And so at this time, there is nothing new to report on that end.
Erica, can I add a communication there?
Absolutely.
It was more to my Board of Ed side, but I wanted to let you all know because it came up last meeting on the 16th, sorry, 2 meetings ago, that we did receive a cancellation for the roof projects. So after he came through to this meeting, they did cancel both roof projects. So just an FYI, because it was discussed at this meeting, that I'm passing that along as well.
Okay. Thank you. So we'll move to.
Oh. To that point, Phil, if nothing happens to anything with the school committee, we have to go reapply for all that?
Yes, we can reapply, and he wants to make sure we know, and I say we, like the town knows what we're doing with the schools. If there's no project that's going to happen, we would be eligible to reapply. And he's the formal letter that they sent will allow us to use all the same materials and move pretty quickly. So that was a big thank you because it's a lot of work. And the fact that we can reapply and use all the same stuff is definitely a good thing.
Okay. Moving on to committee reports, the communications committee. Phil, do you have anything?
We didn't meet. We did our work through email, and we'll get down to that when we get to the FAQ.
I will just add, I believe Gary was going to step down from communications. Is that still the plan? Now I see you shake your head. Not sure.
If I can,
Yeah.
I've been named to the other
Right.
subcommittee as well, so I prefer to stick to one. If somebody's willing to be on the communications committee, I'd appreciate it.
So if there's anyone willing to join the communications committee, that was Gary, Ann, and Phil. right,
And
think
I,
about it.
I can stay on until we identify someone else to replace me, if that's helpful.
I think it's okay if you step down, and we'll see if someone, I would be willing to, but I think it would probably be best if there was someone other than just like myself on that. And so we can talk about it at our next meeting. Hopefully someone give it some thought. It's not a huge time commitment, but it is going to be important. All right, Land Acquisition Committee. We do have an item and we'll discuss later in executive session. So what we will need is a volunteer to lead this subcommittee. That leader would provide updates, recommendations to this committee, to the full committee, create minutes and agendas. So of the members of the Land Acquisition Committee, would any of you be willing to step up as the leader of that committee? Don't all raise your hand at once.
If Phil, you're willing to work with me a little bit and give me some guidance on kind of how you got it started and how you're making the contacts, I'd be willing to shepherd that along.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Mike.
I mean,
Great, thanks, Mike. Do you already have a next meeting planned?
We don't know.
No, okay, right. All right, so that will bring us to, I see Peter and Ralph have now joined us.
Thank you, Ralph.
Okay,
But if Mike, Erica,
Yes.
if Mike is willing to take that leadership role, we can, in the next day or so, we can try to come up with our next meeting.
okay,
and I said I would attend that first meeting because I think one of your first tasks is to go through the public land, town land.
I'm
Right.
starting taking notes.
okay. All right, seeing anything else, that committee, other than what's on our agenda? All right, seeing none, we will move on to old business, which would be the approval of the School Building Committee's frequently asked questions document. You all should have received that. And so at this point, we'd be looking to approve the FAQs based on the comments received by the deadline that we had stated. So I would, this would be an action item, so I would entertain a motion to approve the FAQ documents.
I'll make that motion, get the conversation started.
My mic, is there a second?
I'll second, Catherine.
Seconded by Catherine. Okay, discussion.
Just for my point, I didn't have an opportunity to take Ralph's comments and sort of line them up with what was in the FAQs already. So I'm anxious to hear if anyone got that opportunity, what they have to say. But overall, I thought we have a very good, I think we have a very good set of material.
I think it was Peter's comments, right? Not Ralph's.
I'm sorry.
Wasn't me.
Sorry.
Just confirmation.
I'm trying to scan through screens here and go back to the emails and keep track.
Yeah, I hear you.
So, Erica, if I may just make a statement about that.
Mhm.
Mike, to your point with Peter's comments, we did get them later than what we had anticipated as far as the deadline. I believe we gave all the committee members a week or so to get us comments. And so we were prepared today to bring it to the table for approval. So the comments that we got from you, Peter, we'll look at it. We'll look at them, but it's not part of today's approval. So we're voting to approve this, and we'll evaluate your comments for applicability and accuracy. And then in a future update, we'll make the updates then.
Makes sense.
Yeah, and if I hear Catherine, would we assume that would go back to the communications committee? I think at that point, the work should be done in that committee.
That's right.
Okay.
And just another point to that, there won't be any additional comments to those existing questions. So any new questions that get asked that we're gonna update the FAQ document will come to the board, but it's only an opportunity to make comments on the new questions. We're not gonna keep going back to the old questions and modify and wordsmith those. Does that make sense?
Catherine, I think the only, in my mind, the only thing we would do with the questions we have now is some of that information may update or change as we move along. So I think we should keep in mind, we may have to revise just as our information changes.
Good point, Mike. Thank you.
That the changes would come with new and changing information as opposed to
Right.
anything stagnant. Okay. Any other discussion on the frequently asked questions document? Right, seeing none, I will call for a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Are there any noes?
Nay.
One. Okay, so at this point, I will do a roll call vote. Again, I mentioned earlier, I'll talk about it later. For meetings of this nature, beginning July 1, it's a requirement for any votes that are not unanimous. So Anne Grosjean,
Yes.
Mike McCoo,
Yes.
Justin Naderno,
Yes.
Brianna Ross,
Yes.
Gary Anderson,
Yes.
Peter Latensic,
No.
Catherine Viveros,
Yes.
Ralph Tulis,
Yes.
and Eric Washinsky votes yes. I just want to make sure whoever's in the phone box, that I just went box to box, that's not a member. I believe Erica for sure is the only missing member. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So unless that's Erica on the phone, we got everyone. Okay, so motion carries. All right, new business. We didn't really have an opportunity for all of us to discuss and talk about our meeting with Director Diamantis at our last meeting. So this is an opportunity for board members to make comments. Kind of what you got out of that, any comments you want to make about what was said during the director's presentation at our last meeting. Is there anyone who would like to begin?
Well,
Peter?
judging from the
Hold on,
overwhelming response.
hang on, Ralph. Peter?
That's okay. Go ahead, Ralph. I'll wait.
Okay, when I point blank asked if we came up with a viable plan for Hall School to reconfigure and renovate, we were not shut out from that possibility. That's what I got out of that. And his reply to my question was, well, let's see what you have. And I think that that's a consideration that this committee has to take a look at carefully. What does Willington need in a K-8 school with respect to facilities? I don't want to hear we need 50,000 square feet. I want to hear how many classrooms do we need? What support offices do we need for that number of classrooms for that staff? I'd ask questions, and Phil got back to me on parking spaces. We need 100 spaces. Okay. How can we work that in with what we have to work with?
The 100 parking spaces was approximate for staff only.
Okay. Well, that didn't completely answer my question then. This is one of the things that I think that this committee has to consider and not just take it for granted that we're going to build a new school. So that's my initial reaction to that conversation.
Peter?
I just wanted to comment that I was quite surprised in Mr. Costa's response to us, and that I was expecting a very stern, inflexible Harvard bureaucrat that was going to say, you can do this and that's it. I didn't get that impression at all. I thought he was quite open-minded, quite flexible, and as Ralph suggests, open to all the possibilities that this committee should be reviewing, not a single one. Even in the area of the roofs, which seemed to be very much on everyone's mind at that last meeting, was pretty straightforward to me. If we elect to build a new school, then we pay back for the roofs because they're town buildings. If we don't, then I mean, I asked the question, he answered it that way, Phil. So I don't understand.
I think, Peter, you missed when
I
you may have hopped on
misunderstood.
late. And Phil shared with us that the roof project has been formally canceled by OSTGR. So it is no longer, do we have the ability to continue with the project and pay them back? They have formally canceled the project before the end of the fiscal year.
Well, you kind of cut me off there, Erica, but
No, I wanted to make sure I didn't believe.
I received that communication, and I'm perplexed by that because that's not what Mr. Costa said the evening he was with us. But I'll leave it there.
So my biggest concern, I'll throw my 2 cents in, is I feel like there's a lot of public cover up, or not cover up, but I'm not going to put myself out on the line in the public. He'll take whatever we put out there for examples. If we could, to Ralph's point, do some type of addition or make the school a viable source, I think he'll entertain it. My concern is if there's something or it's not meeting his criteria, he's not going to entertain it. I just don't think he's going to publicly come out and say, that's not what I want to pay for.
And to Justin's point, I think he said at one point that they would make the final determination and something along those lines. I also, to Ralph, I got from him, it was very clear that there was a formula and a process by which the acreage for a new renovate to new school because we're reconfiguring to pre-K through 8 and the number of acreage. And I think he made it pretty clear to us that we did not on either of our current sites have the required acreage.
He never said that.
He said it would have to be between his guidelines.
Right.
I'm not saying Ralph is wrong. I think we need to entertain it to some degree. When we start talking about how much money we're going to put towards something to either renovate that or to build new is where my concern starts coming in.
Gary?
So I reviewed I wasn't unfortunately able to be at the meeting, but I reviewed the meeting today, and I have to say I heard things a little bit differently than a couple other folks. I thought he was as clear as he could have been about his thoughts about renovation of Hall School in particular. I think he wasn't, he was hedging because he didn't have a plan in front of him. He didn't have the calculations of required acreage. And so he was being careful with what he said, but he said things like, you're a prime candidate for consolidation. He said, Hall has a lot of problems pre-K through 1, and Center School would have those same issues. He said, in his mind, it was at its end of its life as a school. And then when people asked about the acreage question, without coming out and saying, no way in heck is that ever going to happen. I think he was saying in a nice way, you've got a problem there. If you're going to add capacity to the school, that's going to be a problem. So, I actually thought the direction was pretty clear. So that was just my take on it.
Anne or Mike, I don't want to discount Catherine if she wants to speak. Anyone else?
Yeah, Erica, I was just gonna echo everything Gary said. I mean, I actually, before I sent the YouTube link for this last meeting, I actually reread it or re-watched it, and that's exactly what Costa said. He was pretty clear about what he thought about Hall School. He was clear about the application process and what guidelines needed to be followed in order to get the funding. So I echo basically everything he said, especially the acreage. He did say that, you know, you got to follow the guidelines with the acreage. And someone asked specifically, I think it was Ralph maybe, that if there was any difference, if it was in Hartford or in Willington. And he said, no, the acreage is the same. The acreage requirement is the same as if there was a school in Hartford. So,
I don't buy that answer for 1 minute.
but
I'm sorry.
He did say,
I know what he said. I know what he said. I heard what he said. I don't buy it for 1 minute.
okay, well, he's the one that grants all these states the money for the schools. So that's what we have to keep our eyes focused on.
We have to have a viable plan. Yes, I agree. Does it have to meet their acreage requirement? I'm not convinced that it absolutely has to. As long as we provide the facility that teaches kids what they need to learn and provides the facilities that are needed for our student population, I think the acreage is a BS requirement. Sorry, that's my opinion.
I respectfully disagree, Ralph. I believe if the town of Willington were to need and take the funds of the state of Connecticut OSCGR, we would absolutely have to follow their guidelines. And I don't know, I can't imagine a way in which we would suggest that we not apply for a grant for something like this.
So in other words, we don't try, we roll over to what they're saying.
They have guidelines, and I think he made it clear to us that as he didn't have them in front of us, so he wasn't going to quote us a number. Phil has shared them with us. It's a public document, and it's a guideline that anyone else would have to follow along with. And he was asked the question, if it were in Hartford, did they get a pass because they don't seem to have as much land as they do in Willington? His answer was a very clear no. It would be the same. The requirement is the requirement based on the formula.
Well, I think we need to look at other schools where they have supplied funding that doesn't meet the acreage requirements.
Mike?
So I don't have the advantage of having attended the meeting, and I didn't have time to get to the video, and I apologize. I would have loved to have reviewed it before tonight. But I think all of these ideas point to a couple of things. First of all, we are not going to solve this tonight. Second of all, we're not going to solve this without their input. Because in the end, whether he bends or doesn't bend is still going to be his decision. And because we probably have limited ability to appeal that as well. So I think in my mind, I think we go forward still looking at a lot of different options. And if we come up with a compelling reason to really push on him, you know, if for some reason we come up with this magical plan that we think really benefits our community and can accomplish the goals the state's looking for and is maybe 2 acres short or whatever the number is, I think that's when we have a more serious conversation and say, listen, our committee work's pointing us in a certain direction. Before we get too far down that road, can we ask you one more time, is this possible at all? I don't feel like the door is shut, but I think we should be taking the guidance seriously because he has the veto power.
I don't disagree with the guidance, Mike, with respect to the facilities itself. The only thing I take issue with is this 20-acre minimum. That's all. Let's see what we can put together. Be it a addition and renovation of a portion of Hall School. And what I've always maintained is we excise the 1922 building from any plans with Hall School. And that is not what we're asking for funding on. That's a separate project that EDC also needs to get involved with. The plan for South Willington needs to be considered. We can't isolate the school from the entire area. I think it's essential to the town of Willington to look at not only Hall School, but all of these other peripheral projects that are intended for the benefit of South Willington. They all need to
Can I
work
ask,
together.
what projects you're referring to, Ralph? I don't understand.
Okay, we have the sidewalk project. We have a proposed village zoning regulations that the planning and zoning would like to get together. We would like to see mixed use possibilities for South Willington. If we're going to invest money in that area of town, the school is an integral part of that whole village, and it needs to be considered. We can't pull the school out of South Willington and build something somewhere else without considering the impact that it's going to have on the village as a whole. I'm sorry, that's where I see this. We can't.
Ann or Phil?
We've got to look at the whole picture. We have to have a holistic approach to South Willington.
But our job and our guidance, Ralph, I will remind us all, our charge is a plan for a consolidated pre-K through 8 school, and then
I
looking at the
understand.
use of the facilities, the school facilities, and consider those uses. So we obviously would be cognizant of a broader approach, but our work and scope is limited. Ann or Phil, we haven't heard from either of you. Did you want to share?
Yeah, I kind of wished he was a little bit more assertive, as we almost expected him to be. I do feel he got a little wishy-washy at times. But I did hear clearly that Hall did not meet the specifications. And granted, we could go ahead and do whatever we want, but what we're talking about from him is getting our reimbursement for the money that we spend. So I think it's really important that when we submit anything to him, that it meets all of the guidelines. So if there is a plan that could work, then so be it. But I don't have a lot of faith that that would be on the Hall School property.
I apologize, Brandon, we haven't heard from you either, if you wanted to share. Trying to play the Hollywood squares here.
Yes, thank you. I agree with everything Gary had to say. He took a lot of my ideas and shared them. Thanks, Gary. And also, just regarding center school, it seemed like after Costa looked at our information we provided about both schools, and after he toured Hall, he did not have interest in going to center. And Ann did ask him if he thought center could be considered as a renovation, and he said that we have to rule that out based on its age, the size of the footprint, and what we're looking to accomplish. So after he said that, I felt like I was hearing him loud and clear, thinking that building new would probably be in our best interest and the best interest for our students. And I am certainly open to hearing all possibilities. I think that we all want what's best for our children, best for our community. And so we will be fair, of course, going forward. But there are certain rules in play, of course. And our town is not made of money trees. So we have to rely on financial support from big things like OSCGR. So we have to know that and work within their rules and such. I liked Ralph's idea about asking to begin or to start thinking about what we need. I know we've kind of done some dreaming about things we might want on a wish list, but maybe to start thinking about what we do need. And sometimes that does include the acreage. It always includes the acreage. When we met back in February, Phil told us that the acreage requirement for us is 15 acres plus 1 for every 100 students. And that's back in our minutes from February 22nd or 23rd, I think. And so maybe we can work together and find where that formula is so we can put that number down for sure and we can all agree upon it, because that seems to be something we keep going around and around about, is that acreage. So let's just find that formula and figure it out and use it. I think also, like Ralph was saying, to think about what we need. we need to also think about the codes that we need to consider. And I heard Costa loud and clear when he was talking about house school and how it would be very difficult to make it accessible for our youngest students because they do have specific codes. Mike had talked about the fire codes for those younger students one time. And also ADA has to be considered across the board. And we already know that's a little bit of trouble in both of our buildings. So I thought it was very helpful to hear from him. I agree that he seemed very clear and also was unable to say certain things he might have wanted to, but that's the nature of his professionalism. So.
Thank you, Brianna. Phil, do you want to comment?
I just took, and I'm looking at a paper, I just took all of his quotes. And I think Gary hit a bunch of these, but you know, the district as a whole is a prime candidate for consolidation. Troublesome to renovate, and these are his quotes, troublesome to renovate if consolidating. Didn't see Hall School as a building where consolidation, it would be a candidate for consolidation. Same thing, codes that Brianna just said. And he did say, you know, HMS is at the end of its life as a school. And to Ralph's point, part of our role in this committee is to figure out if we do leave this Hall School and Center School, one school, we have to figure out what those, you know, some ideas for what those buildings could be. It's part of the charge of this committee. So just because if we were to leave Hall School, it doesn't mean that's the end of that building. There could be something to go along with it. And he said point blank, you would need a new school based on the needs and codes of the age group pre-K through 8th grade. That is exactly what he said. When he was pressed on the could we questions, that's where he was a little bit softer because he didn't want to shut something down where he didn't have a plan in front of him. He wasn't asked to run our calculations because I run our calculations. I know exactly what the formula is and I know exactly where it is. And it's in our Google Drive, folks. It's there. And it is 19 acres. He said nothing's off the table with respect to reimbursement if the town and OSCGR feel it meets the use of building, educational, and code requirements. I have to sign off on the suitability and safety of the site. My team, him saying this, of architects and inspectors will make the ultimate decision whether there is still usefulness to the building. I will tell you, point blank, we did the same thing with the roof project and we just spent $80,000 and we are not replacing our roofs. So some people question, does he have the power to do? And he just showed you, he does have the power to do, and he just did. He shut down both roof projects. So they have their expectations. He said it would be hard to see how you could meet the necessary requirements with less than 20 acres. It's 19. That's the minimum that we would need usable acres. And I know that what that looks like is in question, and we could submit some plans to him, but they are very clear about their expectations. I would hate to see us spend any money on something that they're just going to say, great plan, but you don't have 19 acres. So I would want to know that information up front if we were going to present something. So I thought he was very clear, and I just pulled his quotes of what he said. My 2 cents.
Gary?
Yeah, I was just going to kind of jump on something that Phil said there. So really the option here, if the building committee thought that looking at Hall School was still something worth doing, would be to spend money and to have a concept done. Okay, look at our enrollment projections, look at what you could do with a building renovation, and spend some money and do a concept and then show it to them. From what Costa said, I think that's a waste of money and a waste of time. I just, I think we know what the answer is going to be, but we could choose to do that. We could choose to, spend taxpayer money on something that, might have a small chance of being approved, maybe. But I just don't, it just seems clear to me that that's not what they will approve in the end. So, but there's no other choice. We can't just keep talking about it. You have to show them something at some point. And to me, it's not really worth taking that risk. But
Anne?
Ralph, I think, if we did go forward with a new school plan, you'd then have the hall building, which would be wonderful for the South Willington Village concept. Then we'd have that building to go with that project, which I think would be great too.
And who owns the building if it goes in that
It's the hall.
direction?
If that's up to the Hall family, but if they wanted to continue to work with the town, then there's a lot of wonderful potential there. Just not a school, as Costa said.
Justin?
Do we have like civil prints or anything that from the school? So I'm just wondering, based on talking with Ralph and some stuff that Costa had said, with the windows and the ventilation, that I'm just wondering if it's viable. Can we rule it out for any reason, looking at like civil prints for the building, how it's built, before we start spending and throwing money at an idea one way or another, whether it's this school or a new school?
I think the gym as it stands we can save the gym and we can integrate that into a renovation. The south side of the original building, I think, has some potential. The south wing has potential. We can add a second south wing parallel with the existing one. We can get space that works for K through 8 if we at least get out a napkin and start scratching something down that has the spaces that the school needs.
I think we're beyond us scratching on a napkin. I agree with Gary that we'd have to put some money into a real concept design, and understand that would mean, whether you agree with me or not, Ralph, that would mean additional acreage, and whatever acreage leaving the existing building free from use as a school, and whatever parking goes with it, we would lose more acreage from our already short number, I think. But I don't think this committee is not going to be able to come up with that concept on our own. That is not, in my mind, a good use of our time. It would be important that we decide if we want to, as a committee, spend taxpayer dollars on that, if that's the way we go. But we can talk conceptually about a lot of things. We need some real hard, concrete facts so that someone could say yes or no to them. So I agree with Gary on that. Peter, I saw your hand raised.
Yes, I want to make a couple of observations. I don't think that our goal is to satisfy Costa or meet OCGR rules or do what the state thinks is viable or not viable. We are a town committee empowered by the town's people to come up with a solution. I think we need to look at, on a macro level, what those potential solutions are and then narrow them down. Once we do that, and as a committee decide we even want a new school, which we have not done yet. So I'm absolutely puzzled as to how the roofs were canceled, but that is clearly another issue. Nothing has fundamentally changed. But I think we need to come up with our own solution, irrespective of funding sources or rules or state requirements. I'm encouraged by what I heard from Mr. Costa, that if we do that, to me, I just strongly disagree with Phil and others here. He seemed to suggest that could be a collaborative process. And I think we can find that out without spending any taxpayer money by narrowing down the options we wish to pursue.
Erica?
Yes, Catherine?
Can I just comment to what Peter was saying with regards to, I know, Peter, you said that you don't understand how the OSCGR can make, why we have to listen to them, basically. Well, the financial piece is a big part of the decision of how this committee moves forward and makes decisions. I understand your point of exploring other options, but a big part of this committee's charge is to solve the problem, not just from a logistical and operational, educational, safety perspective, but a big part of it is financial. And if we ignore that piece of it, the townspeople are not going to be happy, because where's the money going to come from? So I understand your point that you don't understand how they have so much power to tell us what a town should do, but it is a big part of it. The other point I wanted to make was, I don't think Costa was just talking about the land. I also believe that the funding, when they decide to fund a project, there's also a student population minimum. And I believe that number was 400. And so if we were to ask him for renovation money, to Ralph's point, to renovate Hall School, that school has to have at least 400 students in it currently before he would agree, before they would agree to fund a renovation project for that building. That's my understanding. Phil, do you agree?
I just unmuted. I think his point is if you consolidate and you had 300 students, they would consider that. He said, when you get down into the 200s, maybe we need to start looking at something else, sending students out to another district or something like that. He said you could have 385. 400 was his magic number. Like, that's the size of what they would say a quote unquote good school. If you're going to build a school for 400, that's what his point was. They would approve a renovation with numbers under that. As long as, and I think it was Donna Cook that asked this question, would you allow us just to renovate Hall School? And he said point blank, no, I would not. And so that's his point, because that's where you're at 200.
Right.
If you're consolidating and you're under that 400 number, I think it's going to go through. Look, they built a school for 60 or 80 kids or whatever it was up in Union that passed through, and they're even smaller now. But they're looking for, again, this is the balance of what does the town want, along with what will OSCGR support. Justin, to answer your question that you were asking about the prints, I will tell you, when Fryer did their facility study and they looked at the plans, their comment when they did that study was, you have to do a full gut to do a renovation in this building to meet all of the code requirements. That was what they said. Now, maybe someone can draft a plan that doesn't look like that. I don't know. But I will tell you that the Fryer is an architectural company firm that builds schools. The other thing, Brianna, that you said that we need to start thinking about, and this is I think to Ralph's point too, is we need to start thinking about what we want in the school. That is not the role of this committee. The role of that falls on the role of the Board of Education. Their job is to develop education specifications. That's a requirement of the grant. It would be a requirement of building or renovating. And that is, what do you want in your buildings? That conversation comes out of the Board of Education. And then would come to this committee, and it would be the job of this committee to make that come to life.
Thank you, Phil. All right, any other comments on our meeting with Director Diamantis?
Just another comment to what Phil just said. Are we putting the cart before the horse here by not knowing what the Board of Education expects of a school?
No, I believe that's typical in the process. Once a building project is a go, you know what the square footage of your building is or what their maximum, unless we were to take on the excess cost fully on our own. And then the specifics inside the facility are the responsibility of a Board of Education.
So we put up a building and the Board of Education fills the spaces.
It's part of the whole project, but those educational specs come from the Board of Education, and then
I understand. I understand that. but I'm still hearing this as if you build it, they will fill it. And that to me seems backwards.
I think in my mind, I think what this is this is a multi-pronged approach. There are a lot of layers to this. And to what Erica just said, we're going to do some basic understanding of looking at the formula, the guidance. Phil had sent out the link to the state's guidance on the basic how you plan and design a school, the standards, which is what we're going to get evaluated against. We can use a lot of that information. Like there's information there like an elementary school gymnasium is 2,500 square feet. A middle school gymnasium is 5,000 square feet. So we can start with those basic building blocks. We can come up with not even a design on paper, but we can come up with a general rule on the square footage. We can figure out that it meets the formulas. Somewhere along there, we've got to start having the conversation with the Board of Ed, because you can't do a design without doing programmatic. You have to have programmatic consideration to create a design.
Right.
And so you're going to take those steps, programming, schematic, you're going to build your design based on that. So we will soon need to be starting to bring those parallel paths in to start working together. And then at some point, the more detailed work of how they use the space will then kind of veer off into the Board of Ed's world. But we're going to have to work their needs into programming to come up with the actual design. Let's assume this committee decides we're building a new school. Then we need all that. How they actually use it after we make sure that it gets built then goes back to them again. That's just how I'm seeing it.
All right, Justin?
So with the designs that we're coming up with, or what we're talking about, building new or renovating, this is something we probably should start asking the Board of Ed and give them a heads up. Hey, no matter which way we're going here, we're going to need some type of minimum requirements. Like, what would you be looking for? Am I right in saying that, or am I wrong?
So I
I
agree.
would agree with that.
I agree with that.
And the benefit of the way this committee was built, Justin, is with representation from the Board of Education here. You know, those of us, you know, I represent the Board of Selectmen and take key information from our meetings back to those boards, Mike with the Board of Finance and Ann and the Board of Ed. So they are continuously updating their boards, or should be, of where we are in the process with this
Right.
school building committee, so that all of those key parties are involved, and how that evolves would come from that update. Ann?
Yeah, it's on our agenda every month when the Board of Ed meets. And our last formal recommendation was the Board of Ed did make the recommendation to build a new school. That was the last formal input, I believe, that the Board of Ed had.
That was the catalyst to the school building committee, was a recommendation after the studies from the Board of Education. Phil, I saw you unmute. I don't know if you wanted to share.
Yeah, and Justin, a little bit more for your answer is yes, we're probably closing in on that time. But it's also, this is something you hire a professional to help you do. This is where you're going to spend some money. And the reason why is there, you know, an owner's rep is going to know how much square footage you should use for this, how you can maximize space, the average size of a classroom now, and what they require for a classroom size. You know, all of those things. That's typically why you hire an owner's rep, and they are, you know, usually have architects as part of those firms and engineers. And so they would help you walk through that process. It's not that you're designing your building, but you're going to say, hey, I need 16 classrooms for pre-K through 4th grade or 5th grade or 6th grade. 7, 8 would rotate, so they would need not as many, and we need a science, you know, 2 science labs, and you know, in those science labs we would want sinks. They would have all of those code requirements, also the recommendations of what people are doing to save space now and maximize your space. Because you can always say, hey, and I don't know who just said, the average, Mike, you just said the average size of a gym. Some districts could say, you know what, I don't care what they say. We want a gym that's 10,000 square feet or, 20,000 square feet. Well, that just ate up a 30-year building.
Mhm.
And that's why the owner's rep is really helpful in, you can save space by doing this. And, do you really need that number of offices? All of those questions. And they would help the Board of Ed walk through that process, but they also would come back. They're like the liaison to this committee as well. That's what they would do.
All right, so in the interest of keeping us on topic, the item we're on is comments after meeting with Director Diamantis. So do we have any more discussion in that direction? All right, seeing none, I'll move on to item B, discussion on the future of Hall Memorial School. And I'm not sure, again, if the person on the phone represents the Hall Foundation. We had invited them so that they could take part in this discussion, that it's important. I think we all agreed that we wanted them to participate in the conversation and get some input. We could have an overarching conversation, or we could wait to see if someone from the Hall Foundation chooses to join us in public.
You want to ask just point blank, if
Yeah.
you're the 860-818-2221 number, can you just tell us if you're from the Hall Foundation or not?
I think they need to be unmuted.
Everybody has the
No.
ability to unmute.
No, I'm not.
Okay.
No, I'm not. Thank you.
Sorry, it's Melissa.
Oh, that's
thanks,
fine. That's
Melissa.
no problem. All right. So, we can start to have that discussion, or how does the group feel about wanting to wait to partake in that conversation? I don't know if they were at the last meeting or have had a chance to view it. Justin, I see your hand up.
I was just going to say that maybe we should table that, because I think having their input first before we start talking about it would be better. But that's my personal opinion. Sorry.
I
Thank you.
second that.
Peter, Catherine says that. Peter, I saw your hand up.
I agree with Justin. We should probably table. My understanding is that the Hall Foundation would very much like to attend an in-person meeting with us. And I'm assuming that can happen in August now that the executive order is expiring.
Well, if we're done with this topic, we will continue and make the request to have them join us in whatever capacity we choose, Phil. But the next topic, we'll talk about meetings.
I would just say that we've gotten some general feedback, but it's been hard to get some of that feedback. I think that from the Hall Foundation, this has been a very sensitive subject, and I think we all understand that, why it's a sensitive subject, and I really appreciate that. I think we also need to think about giving them another outlet, maybe coming onto a Zoom or coming into a public meeting in person is not the way that they want to have that conversation, because it's recorded and there's minutes. I don't know that. Maybe they want to send us a letter. I think if, we can give them any outlet to share their thoughts, maybe that's a different way to look at it. I mean, I'll speak for just myself. I don't want to see Hall School torn down. I think it does have value for something in the future. And I think they may need to hear that this committee feels that way. I don't know if everybody feels that way. I don't want to speak for you, but I do believe that. But my 2 cents is I think we need to maybe think about giving them another outlet other than here on Zoom or on the phone or in person at a meeting.
Is there any reason why we could not have that discussion with the Hall Foundation in executive session?
There is nothing about it that would lend itself to the for uses of executive session. So
There is or there isn't?
there is not.
Because I think that's part of the reluctance on the part of the Hall Foundation to participate in these meetings.
And while I don't disagree, Ralph, we're limited in what we can't take the liberties of choosing anything we want to be an executive session if it doesn't fit into that role. I think it's our duty to maintain that same level of professionalism across all of our public meetings.
Erica, can I just make a comment? So to Ralph's point, I did reach out to a member of the Hall Foundation and personally invite them to our last two meetings. And as far as I know, they have not come on. I also offered to just have a conversation on the phone with one other member of the committee, and they responded that they wanted to have the whole committee there. And the only way to do that publicly is via this meeting. So we're going to continue to reach out and invite them to our meetings, and hopefully they will attend, whether it's on Zoom, whether it's in person, or whether it's just via phone call. So I'm interested to hear if anybody does have another outlet that Phil was mentioning, because they, like I said, I did reach out to have a smaller discussion with them, and they said, no, I want the whole committee there. Well, the only way to meet with the whole committee is right here in these meetings. Thank you.
Right, so maybe we can reach out and offer our next meeting, and or if they would like to send a written communication. But we definitely, I think what I'm hearing from everyone is that everyone here fully believes we should hear from them. I think it's vital to our community we hear from them. Justin, did I see your hand up?
I was just going to make the comment that, you know, I wasn't sure, Catherine, I didn't know you were reaching out to them. I didn't know who was reaching out, but however they get their point across and their feelings to us, I think is more important than them physically being here. So if they want to, I'm more than happy and would like to have them publicly do that because of the way our committee is set up. But I think having their opinion is the most important.
Right, so we'll try to reach out to them again. All right, we'll keep this on the agenda under some old business then. So we'll move on to discussion of future public school building committee meetings. So as you know, we've been working under executive order on how public meetings were conducted until June 30th. Beginning July 1, in accordance with the implementer bill, or SB 1202, provisions regarding remote and hybrid meetings took effect. So we basically have three ways in which we can hold meetings going forward. And it's up to the boards and commissions to determine how they hold their meetings. So there are three ways. One is what we're doing right now, fully remote. Everybody is by some remote means. And with that would mean there's a caveat: if a member of the public within 24 hours prior to the meeting chooses to attend wants to attend your meeting by electronic means, they do not have that. It has to be a public place, and equipment must be provided by the agency. So ideally, someone would have to let them into more than likely the town office building and provide them the equipment to participate in the manner everyone else would. So I can tell you right now, we don't currently have equipment. If 2 or 3 folks chose to do that and this committee went fully remote, it's possible. It's possible no one may ever request that, but that's a caveat to fully remote. The other option is the old-fashioned, completely in person. Take the remote off the table, and we go back to the old way, follow FOI rules like we did, and you come fully in person into a public place. With that, a member of the board or commission could request to attend a meeting by remote means. They and only they are given the remote information. It does not then change it to a remote meeting, and they could attend in a remote manner while everyone else would be in person. And that could be 1 or 2 members, and the intent is not to change it to a hybrid meeting. The third option is a hybrid meeting. Some folks in public in a public place, and others attending remote. And if you are holding a fully remote or a hybrid meeting, unless the vote is unanimous, the vote must be a roll call vote, which is why I asked everyone earlier, and as soon as we had a no vote, I did a roll call vote. That is a new requirement of the meeting options. And for Brianna's notations, minutes of a remote or hybrid meeting must specify which members were attending in person and which were by electronic means. So we need to determine, I will tell you that currently, if there are multiple meetings on any one given night, we do not have the equipment currently in the town office building to hold hybrid meetings in more than one space. We do have equipment to do it in one space. Right now, we are working on procuring the equipment to hold multiple meetings in 2 spaces. So I would think by the fall, by September, we could accommodate that. So on Wednesday nights, EDC meets and we might meet. We might be on off meetings, but if they're the same, they could both be hybrid and meet in 2 different rooms. Right now, it would be difficult. But I do think, and I think across most boards, we've seen the need to get back in person, but understand that we've made our meetings much more accessible to folks in this manner. So I will open the floor for discussion.
Erica, I have a question.
Yes.
And not that it's gonna make our decision, but as a committee, but do we have any feedback on what some of the other committees have done? Is it a mixed bag where some want all full remote, some want all fully in person? What?
So the indication from the library board is that at least for the time being, they're going to maintain fully remote. That was their consensus prior to hearing all of the implications of this bill. The Board of Selectmen voted last night to continue in the hybrid manner. I believe PZC last night also discussed moving forward in a hybrid method. So that does get folks in person and remote. So there was, I apologize, some of that came out of the meeting we had discussed, but it has to be each board's. But I would ask that we consider the fact that currently there isn't technology if there's an overlap of meetings. So we might have to either cancel meetings or make decisions within the 48-hour time frame. One of the caveats I should mention, and Catherine was there at the presentation I made to board chairs, 48 hours before a remote or hybrid meeting, the members of the board have to be notified of the fact that the meeting was going to be held in that way. So you would have certainly some notice, but it would make it more difficult to change things rather quickly.
Erica, you said you're trying to outfit a second room.
Yes.
Time frame?
Well, the funds that I proposed last night at the Board of Selectmen, Mike, as a Board of Finance Chair, hasn't gotten a formal communication from me yet, but they'll be getting one to add this to the agenda next month. We're suggesting using some ARPA funds to purchase some things. Then it would have to go to a town meeting, which ideally would be held first week in August. And so by the time we've procured things, we're probably talking the end of August. So I would think by our September, once we've got a sense from all the boards, it would be easy to kind of lay out a map of who meets on what nights. We are the first and third Wednesday. I believe the second Wednesday is EDC. There's not a lot of other overlap on Wednesday nights, which is why we chose Wednesday night for this board. So I think we could be pretty safe to be able to go to a hybrid if that's the version we chose. There are pros and cons to each option. The hybrid, if the equipment is available, lends itself to the openness we've allowed over the last 15 months and made available to folks. I think we've seen more people attending our meetings. Certainly we can see from numbers on YouTube, more folks watching the meetings. We had the ability to go back and review, like Gary mentioned, when he couldn't be at the meeting. And storage is less of an issue because we only have to keep those videos for 45 days. So that will cut down, but we will keep them on YouTube. We just won't have to store them on our own servers. Some thoughts?
Well, I think hybrid is really the future of how public meetings are going to go, and it's the most complicated, but it allows the most access for as you said, there's pluses and minuses to both all in person and to doing all online meetings. So to me, that's probably the best way to go. We're allowing folks to come who would prefer to come in person, and we're allowing folks to still participate online if they choose to. So I think it's kind of a no-brainer myself.
And the hybrid doesn't mean that we couldn't all be in the room together. If everyone on this board chose to be physically in the public space, that still, we'd still hold a hybrid meeting. It allows the public to participate in the manner in which they have been. So that's the alter. And
I also think that if we did hybrid, in any event that we did have to shut down and go back to totally virtual, we're used to that. You know, we have that structure set up for our meetings just in case we did have to go back to that temporarily or whatever.
Sorry, Eric, I just muted you, but I was
That's all
trying
right.
to say that Brianna has her hand up.
no problem, Brianna.
I do. Hi. I think hybrid is definitely the best way to go. If ever we're worried about a quorum in person because people are, I don't know, out of town or ill, this could solve that problem like today. And also I spent many years not able to attend town meetings in the evenings because I had small children at home and my husband worked a shift that made me the sole caregiver. And being able to come this way would have made a huge difference, and I would have been able to participate, and I've been a lot more knowledgeable about what's going on in our town. And particularly when we're talking about our schools, those are families, the families need to know, and the families of the young children need to know. So I think that would really be helpful to those folks at home who do have to chase little ones around in the evening and still be able to hear and comment and participate. So hybrid is my vote.
Do you see anyone else who wants to comment?
I'd certainly vote for hybrid.
Okay. Thank you, Ralph. Peter? I see your
Just a
hand.
question. I am not opposed. As long as we can have in-person meetings, I'm very happy to resume doing that. But by having a hybrid, it does give more access, and I understand that. But it doesn't prevent us from all meeting in person, does it?
It does not.
No restriction on us meeting in person.
No, not at all. So again, we're a board of 11, 10 people could choose to be in person and someone could be traveling and hold this way. Listen, when we talk about technical issues, there are going to be some things that come into play there, and whether or not you have to resume and where your quorum is, those come into play, but absolutely not, Peter. A hybrid meeting does not prevent some of us from being in the room, and it doesn't prevent members of the public from being in the room. So last night, the Board of Selectmen held our meeting as a hybrid meeting. So the board members were present, and we had two people in the audience. They happened to be both staff members, but still we had two live people at our meeting, and then everyone else participated via Zoom. And it went off without a hitch. So I can't say that we'll never have any technical glitches. It will get easier as we move from fully remote to potentially a hybrid, but I think it really keeps us connected with folks. And to Brianna's point, I think we have a young parent on the line here who's been able to join us for a lot of meetings throughout this time that maybe she wouldn't have been able to if we had all been solely in person. So
At the risk of being over anxious, so is there anything preventing us from going to in-person hybrid next month?
to hybrid, no, it's up to this board. We have to decide. So
Oh,
no,
okay.
starting July 1, we could have done those things. I did ask every chairperson, because we don't have the equipment to have multiple hybrid meetings in our public spaces. I asked each chairperson to decide how their first meeting went and then have that discussion amongst us. So some may decide for the summer until we can work out scheduling issues and actually have equipment available. You'll find some towns, I know our friends in Ashford are not prepared to have even one hybrid meeting. And so they would need to procure equipment all along. I made that step with some of our CRF funds at the end of the calendar year that are allowing us to be able to do so. But I believe scheduling wise, Peter, looking at some of the other meetings, that our Wednesday meetings could still at this point, if we chose hybrid, be in the hybrid and we'd have use of the equipment.
Great,
Mike,
thank you.
Mike?
Erica, for the boards or committees or organizations that want to move forward using that ARP money, understanding there's a process, and this is probably even more important question for Board of Finance 2 weeks from now, but is ARP refundable, or if someone goes out and sets up their space to be hybrid right now, will the ARP say, well, you already spent the money?
I believe it will. So the language is pretty wishy-washy on that, Mike. It does make it sound as though anything back to the date in which the bill was signed, that we should be able to use expenses for there. So you're asking whether or not we could go ahead and procure equipment and then reimburse afterwards. I believe that is possible. I would tell you, I'm not ready to make a purchase. I have a demonstration on a device tomorrow. I had hoped it would be before we were having these meetings, but I think everyone is in demand of the same kind of equipment.
Right.
And so some of it is a larger project. What we'll do the smaller meeting rooms is a less costly method. And so I think it's possible we could use a budgetary funds, but that's still questionable.
Okay. Yeah, I was just curious, if all these different various groups decide to move forward with hybrid, there may be a lot of need to get spaces available.
And that was, so I had, and I don't think you were able to make the meeting. I had, not every board chair was there, but it was kind of put together quickly because the language from the implementer bill came out pretty late. Was to alert those board chairs to that you would now have options, and it's up to the boards to decide. It's not the Board of Selectmen, it's not at the governor's level anymore, and made them aware at that point when they took the discussion to their boards that we don't have equipment beyond one room right now. So that's a concern. But it's also a concern for fully remote. If somebody suddenly came in, it might mean me putting them in a public space, which is my office, with a computer so they could watch this way. I'm not sure what that would look like if we had those requests yet.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Justin, I think we heard from Ralph. Catherine, I won't put her on the spot. She had sent me a note that said she recommended hybrid.
Yes, and with that said, can I put a motion on the table for
Yes,
that
you may.
all future SBC meetings be conducted with the hybrid method?
Can I just comment, should that be until further notice? Because we may have to, when the legislation expires, we may have to make changes, right?
Yes, correct. I should have started. I apologize. I didn't mention that. Good point, Mike. This SBC 1202 is in effect through April 30th, 2022. So my guess is that they're working on lengthier legislation. It didn't pass in the regular session, so it was included in the implementer bill.
So Catherine, since it hasn't been seconded yet, if you're willing to accept the friendly amendment of, instead of saying all future meetings, it would be meetings until further notice.
Yep, that's fine.
I'll second that.
Motion by Catherine, seconded by Mike. Any discussion?
If there's an issue with a second meeting that night and you don't have the technology, you don't have an out. So could you say unless give Catherine as the chair an out unless otherwise adjusted by the chair of the committee? I don't know how to say it, but if you had to be fully remote because
there's a call-in number too, right? So if I don't have access, does that mean virtually or does that mean via phone call too? Because I believe we have a call-in number as well.
I think that's what Phil's saying, but we wouldn't, if we didn't have access to the equipment in the room, then there would be no video in the room either. So that would
just a suggestion. I'm sorry.
Yes, go ahead.
Just a suggestion. Do we need to take a vote on this? Can we just do it by consensus? And I mean, I don't think it needs a formal vote, does it? Unless I'm wrong.
Because what could happen, it doesn't need a formal vote. We just have to decide. It just has to be up to that board. I could see if our board were really split, we might want to have a formal motion, but I think I heard the consensus from the group was, unless we can't, let's go hybrid.
Yeah, let's just say that.
So, if an
We
August
have
that
a
reached out
motion and
and said,
we have a motion and a second on the floor, so we have to
You
do
do?
it in some.
I thought we didn't have a second.
Mike
Yeah, I
seconded.
seconded it. Yeah,
Oh,
so
Catherine, unless you
I can
want-
withdraw. That's fine.
Catherine, do you want to withdraw your motion?
Sure.
Okay, and Mike withdraw his second. Okay, so the consensus of the group I'm hearing is we'll, as long as it permits, we will continue with the hybrid meeting method. And then I think by the time we meet again, I'll have a better sense of all the other boards and we'll be able to, you'll see probably a big drawing map behind me that will have laid out all of the other meetings so we can get a sense of who's meeting, what night, and what we will need for equipment. Okay, thank you. That brings us to suggestions for future agenda items, like requests for proposals for an owner's project manager is one. Are there any other suggestions for future agenda items? All right, Peter?
Yes, could we have an agenda item to just review the basic demographics of the new school, what our school population is, what the projections are, what the size of the buildings is now that houses those students, just a general discussion of numbers so that we can start getting a sense of what potential directions we can go in. I'm particularly interested in enrollment figures, past, current, and projections for the future.
Is that all information? I think, I believe that's all information we have and that we discussed at our very first meeting.
What I was looking for was the usual October superintendent's report of current enrollment. I didn't find that. Maybe I'm looking in the wrong place.
Peter, were you able to get access to the Google Drive with all?
Yes, I have the full Google file.
Okay. So maybe, I don't know if Phil knows which document might have some of the information that Peter is looking for. You know, because Phil's probably the most knowledgeable for most of those documents. So I don't know if there's a specific document, maybe a presentation that has all that information, Phil?
We get it every year on the Board of Ed in October.
I think the only thing that would be different than what we currently have on the SBC website, I probably have one additional row on my enrollment figures, and that is what I have in my budget report. But I could easily update that and just drop it into the SBC. But the projections are no different. Past numbers are on the same document. I'm not sure what demographics you're looking at. That's all I would have at this point.
Erica, I'd like to add something for us to consider, is to, I believe this is the right request, is to request funding from the Board of Ed to spend some money on site, I guess, evaluation. As the being on the land subcommittee, I think it's going to be important when we do identify a site that could be a potential good site, we may have to have a professional take a look and just answer some basic questions from a access standpoint, utility standpoint, and we're going to have to request some funding for that.
So there was a CIP item in the budget for building committee consultant.
Okay.
And so I believe if what I'm hearing you correctly is that you'd like us to put in a formal request to the Board of Finance to appropriate those dollars.
Yes.
Okay. So if we want to vote on that, we can, and then that would require the formal communication to the Board of Finance. They would put it on their agenda. If they appropriate the dollars as outlined, then they would then recommend the town, the Board of Selectmen call a town meeting for appropriation of X dollars. And I don't have it in front of me, but I'm 99.9% sure it was $100,000 was the dollar amount in CIP for building committee consultants. Do you want to make that motion now, Catherine?
Yeah, I think, is that the correct, so basically it's already on the table for the CIP. It's just a matter of getting access to it.
That is correct.
Okay. Yeah, I'd like to make a motion on the table to appropriate the funds for building committee consultants to be used by the school building committee.
We're gonna need a dollar amount.
For $100,000.
$100,000. Yeah. You could ask for 4, but the plan only has 100. All right, so the motion on the table by Catherine is to formally request the Board of Finance an appropriation of $100,000 for building committee consultants from CIP. Is there a second?
Can I just ask a process question? That's not on the agenda. How are we acting on that?
That's a very good question.
That is correct.
Well, that would.
I think the agenda item is future agenda items, so we should probably just suggest to put it on the next agenda, I would think.
Right.
All right, so I will move forward then to executive session. At this point, I would make a motion to enter into executive session to review a site for potential land acquisition. Is there a second? Seconded by Ann. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Are there any noes? Peter, I did not see a vote from you, and I apologize, Ralph, I didn't hear you.
I'm sorry. I'm fine.
You're a yes?
Yes.
And Ralph?
I was a yes.
Okay. I just didn't hear you. I apologize.
Erica, give me a second. I'm just gonna pause the recording and
So it was unanimous. So Melissa, unfortunately, as we go into executive session, we can put you in the waiting room and then admit you back when we're out of executive session. So it's 8:23. We've left executive session. Phil, is there anyone still in the waiting room?
no.
Okay, so if anyone joins us now to their after the presentation in executive session. Was there any, Catherine, I think this would now be the time.
Yeah, I was trying to unmute myself. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I'd like to formally make a recommendation to the Board of Finance to appropriate funds for the building committee consultants in the amount of $100,000.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Gary. Any discussion? Peter?
Yes, I disagree with this action. I don't think it's appropriate for us to be seeking funds from CIP or the Board of Finance for potential acquisition of property until we've determined as a committee on the need for a new school. We haven't done that yet. So I'm sensing that looking at properties as was originally explained was reasonable, but pursuing specific properties and appropriating funds to evaluate them seem like we've selected a direction that I'm unaware of and the town's unaware of. And I would vote no for this action.
Any other discussion on the motion, Mike?
I respect Peter's concern. I see the point he's making, but I still look at this as part of that decision-making process. The looking at property, evaluating the possibilities, while we're still working all these other channels that this committee is working, is part of the process. It's a parallel part of the process. It's not a move to make acquisition. It's a move to better understand, lay the groundwork towards acquisition. So I understand his concern because of that, because it's of a lean in a certain direction. But I think that well before us leaning in a direction, this is necessary to understand what direction we might lean or not lean in.
If I can just add to Mike's comment, as Mike, I echo what Mike just said. I also want to bring up one of the things that he pointed out earlier, in that this is a multi-layer process. And in order to get through these multi-layers, we need to spend some money. And the only way we can do that is to allocate the funds to do so. We need to hire professionals to help us get answers to all these multi-layers. We've got a lot of experience on the committee, but we're not experienced to go into the detail and get the information that we need to make educated decisions. So I respect your decision, Peter, but I agree, we need available to the committee so that we can make decisions to hire the professionals to get us the information we need.
Any other comments? Seeing no other discussion, I will call for a roll call vote. And I'm just going to go across the squares here. Anne Grosjean. You're muted, Anne.
Yes.
Mike McCoo,
Yes.
Brianna Ross,
Yes.
Gary Anderson,
Yes.
Peter Latensik,
No.
Justin Adurno,
Yes.
Catherine Viveros,
Yes.
Ralph Tulis,
Aye.
and Erica Washinsky votes yes. Motion carries. All right, I see no other business on our agenda. The next item is present to speak. We do not have any members of the public still on our call. Oops, sorry, I hit the wrong button there. That brings us to our last adjournment. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion by Mike, is there a second? Seconded by Justin. This is a non-debatable matter. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Uh,
Aye.
Aye.
All right, that one's unanimous, so we don't have to take a roll call vote. All right, I thank you all. Catherine, we hope you're feeling better.
Thank you.
Anticipation of that, she will guide us at our next meeting, which will be in the hybrid. So you will have the option in person or not.